Dubois versus Zhang. Someone is getting slept, the brutal truth. Let's be honest. If this fight happens, someone is surely getting knocked out or stopped. And what an exciting fight this would be. Now let's go and seek the different perspectives. So we've got Zhang's perspective and we've got Dubois' perspective. Let's start off with Zhang's perspective. From a Zhang perspective, you're fighting an opponent, which is Dubois, that suffered a devastating knockout, may have a lack of confidence and may have some psychological scars. So I can see how you could get confidence from that. From Dubois' perspective, you're fighting an opponent that suffered their first knockout defeat, has poor stamina, and is advanced in age. So I can see how Dubois would be confident there. Now, when we talk about Zhang, he hits exceptionally hard and he's a very good counterpuncher. He's an underestimated counterpuncher. For a reference point of how hard he hits, look at what he did to Joyce, who had a great chin, knocked him out. He knocked him out the second time and stopped him the first time. And equally, Dubois hits very hard. He has counterpunching skills. Check out the Anthony Joshua fight. And I think he has a significant speed advantage, probably has an advantage with regards to foot movement as well. Now, it's funny with Dubois. It's really funny with Dubois because people question his heart, but Dubois can show a lot of courage. For example, when he fought Filip Hrgović, how many times did he get hit with that right hand? I'm sure he got hit about 50 times with Filip Hrgovic's right hand. Now, some may say, how hard does Filip Hrgović hit? But however you look at it, Filip Hrgović hits hard enough. He can punch. And he hit Dubois over and over and over and over again. And Dubois just took it. He never went down. Clearly, he was hurt at times, but he was able to take the punches. So that's reference number one. Then reference number two, you had Miller. And Gerald Miller is a pressure fighter. Dangerous fighter, was undefeated at the time, and he put you under pressure. And he was throwing big punches at Dubois, putting him under intense pressure, just constantly coming into punching range, taking his punches. But he stood that test and he stopped Miller. I think it was a great performance, a grade A performance. And he showed so much character and bravery. And against Anthony Joshua, even though he dominated that fight, Anthony Joshua had moments, particularly before he got knocked out. I think he hurt Daniel Dubois. And the intensity of the fight, the magnitude of the fight, the massive atmosphere, that would test anyone's character. And Dubois came through it with flying colors. But then you look at the Usyk fights. Look at the Usyk fight, and it seemed like his heart was not in it. Why? Maybe that's a little bit unfair. Maybe it's a little bit unfair because he went in there to win. There's no doubt about that. But he definitely, it felt at some points he got discouraged. Now, why is that? My theory would be that Daniel Dubois can take the punches, but he can't take the frustration. So when he starts missing punches or getting hit with counters or he can't figure out the puzzle, that's when the frustration sets in. And that's when he really starts to starts to falter. And then you got the Joyce fight. And this was unfortunate for Dubois because there was no way to prepare for that Joyce that he fought because Joyce is a pressure fighter who lacks speed and he's like a clubbing fighter. But in that fight, Joyce tried to fight like Larry Holmes. Not that he can fight like Larry Holmes, but he just predominantly used his jab. And that puzzle that he set on Dubois simply could not solve the puzzle. Yes, he hit Joyce with tremendous right hands, which Joyce took. But it was the jab that, again, caused the frustration. And then you had the eye trouble. And then the fight was over. So it seems to me that if you can frustrate Dubois, you can break his heart by frustrating him. That seems to be the main premise. But if he can get his punches off, even if he's taking punches, he can be very heroic. So his heart is quite complicated. His bravery is complicated. He can be very brave, but he can also be discouraged. So here's the thing. Daniel Dubois against Filip Hrgović adjusted. Daniel Dubois against Gerald Miller adjusted. And he had that great performance against Anthony Joshua. But in the Usyk fights and in the Joyce fights, there was an adjustment issue. So to me, it feels like if Daniel Dubois is getting momentum, if he's hitting you with the double jabs, the right uppercuts, the left hooks, the right hand, he is extremely dangerous. I would say against Anthony Joshua, he looked special. That right hand was vicious. That counter right hand was vicious. So it's like with Daniel Dubois, I feel like you've got to make it difficult for him. You've got to confuse him, frustrate him, and you can't let him build momentum. Now, from Zhang's perspective, I feel like you've got to establish the southpaw jab because that's what Zhang has. He has that southpaw jab and the punches come from different angles. You've got to establish that counter straight left. And the one thing that Zhang needs to work on is his pacing and the output of punches because he's struggling in that area. Against Joe Joyce, his punch output was low. In his loss to Caballero, his punch output was higher, but then it got lower, and then he got stopped by body punches. So for me, for Zhilei Zhang to win, he needs to control the distance. He needs to confuse Dubois, walk him into punches. And then I think that Zhang has a good opportunity, not only of winning the fight, but maybe getting a knockout. But from a Dubois perspective, if he can catch the counters, and particularly if he can start working the body, putting his head on Zhang's chest, utilizing the double jab, put punches together, then you could foresee a Daniel Dubois stoppage or knockout. But here's another question. And this, I think, is a really good question. How good is Zhang and how good is Dubois? Are they world level? Clearly, Dubois was world level. He was world level. Is he still world level? Zhilei Zhang looked like $1 million against Deontay Wilder, but does he still have that confidence? And does he still have that punch resistance? Now, again, Dubois' resume under Don Charles was exceptional. Jarrell Miller, Philip Hergovich, Anthony Joshua. But now I hope I'm not mistaken here, I believe he's with Tony Sims, really good trainer. But will Tony Sims be able to bring Dubois back to that level? And then we have this complication of the relationship with the father. And the question is it a positive relationship? Is it a negative relationship? I feel like the media are trying to purport that it's a negative relationship, but I feel like that's a bit of an intellectually lazy narrative, because clearly the father's involvement helps Dubois psychologically. That's probably really important for his motivation and for his spirit. So that's really important. So there's definitely a net positive for his father being involved. Now, the negative is theoretical. So the negative would be if he interferes negatively with camp. Notice the wording, if he interferes negatively. Of course he's going to interfere in camp because it's his son. He has a massive investment for, because he wants the best for his son. But is that interference positive? We don't know. We're not behind closed doors. And will Dubois' lack of independence, again, that's an assumption, will his lack of independence be his undoing? Now, French philosopher Sartre states, quote, "We are our choices," end of quote. And I wonder, the choice to get rid of Don Charles, how will that play out? Will that be positive? Will it be negative? And will the choice, or the perceived choice of not being loyal to a trainer that got him results, will that play out in a positive way? How will the Tony Sims relationship play out? And if he does fight Zhang, is this a good option? Is this the ideal fight for him right now? Now, again, let's shift to Zhang's perspective. From a Zhang perspective, if you're in his corner, you wonder, can he endure the body shots? Can he increase the punch output? And can he deal with Daniel Dubois' experience? And these are critical things, because Zhang really struggled with the body punching from Caballero. And his punch output and his stamina is an issue. He needs to go back to the drawing board and he needs to address that. Maybe he needs to come in lighter, but he needs to not come in too light, but he needs to maybe come in lighter to be able to maintain a better punch output. These are things that can be corrected in camp. Now, here's an important thing to recognize. The win for either one of them, a win for either Dubois or Zhang, it puts them in title contention. And if they can get a viral moment like a knockout, they're right back up there. They're right back up there. Now, here's the objective reality. From my understanding, at the time of writing, the fight is not finalized, but there is negotiation and there is intent to make the fight happen. Now, my final point would be this. If I was Dubois, I would be negotiating for a bigger purse split. This is based on the premise that you say Dubois is the bigger brand. Obviously, Zhang's camp would argue otherwise, but I would negotiate for a bigger purse split. I think he should go for a bigger ring because movement could be essential for Dubois. But I can understand the notion of wanting a smaller ring so that Zhang can't use it. But I think Dubois would want a bigger ring so he can use his foot speed. I think a UK venue would be ideal. So it'd either be a UK venue or a neutral venue. And I think I would contemplate negotiating bigger gloves to neutralize the power of Zhang. Because Zhang's big aspect is his punching power. Now, of course, if you neutralize Zhang's punching power, bigger gloves, you also neutralize your punching power and speed. So that's something to consider. So there's interesting variables at the negotiation table, but this is potentially a great fight. I mean, I would really be curious to see who would win this fight. And I think, this is one of those fights where winner takes all. So hopefully this fight comes into play.